They first noticed the silence at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. In our timeline, Attila the Hun retreated, but the Western Roman Empire still bled out over the next generation, an empire too hollow to survive. But here, in 451 AD, something different happened. The Roman general Aetius did not just defeat the Huns. He broke their will so completely that the barbarian confederations which would have torn Rome apart instead sent envoys. They did not come to demand land, they came to swear oaths. The year is 476 AD, and the man who deposed the last Western emperor in our history, Odoacer, is not a barbarian king. He is a Roman military commander, and his report to the Senate reads not as a coup but as a promotion. The emperor is retired with full honors. The empire, he writes, does not end today. It changes its clothes. This is the divergence that rewrote 2,000 years. If you're curious how other turning points might have changed history, like, subscribe, and comment which alternate timeline to explore next. Now follow the thread forward. In the decades after Majorian's survival, the real pivot, the assassination that never happened, the clerks in the imperial chancery still use the old formulas, of course. They inscribe Imperator Caesar Flavius on documents, tracing letters that have been carved into law for 5 centuries. But the meaning of those words has shifted like silt in a slow river. When Majorian refused to die by the sword in 461 AD, when his food taster, a man named Callistus who had been bribed by Ricimer, instead confessed and named the conspiracy, something fragile and essential did not break. The Senate, which had learned to bow to whichever warlord held the sharpest blade, found itself instead bowing to a man who pardoned Ricimer, who sent him to govern a quiet province in Gaul, who then turned to the business of repair. We have records of that repair. They are not dramatic. They are inventories of granaries restocked along the Via Augusta, of aqueducts patched with new mortar, of tax collectors who were executed for extortion rather than promoted for it. The quiet work of a man who understood that an empire dies not in battle but in ledgers. In the year 467 AD, when the Vandals sailed from Carthage to sack Rome for a second time, they found not a city of ghosts, but a fleet waiting for them off the Sicilian coast. The ships were old, some had been built a generation earlier, their hulls sealed with pitch and prayer. But they burned the Vandal navy, and Gaiseric, the old pirate king, died not in his bed but in the smoke. The world did not notice this at first. It rarely does. But the world of 500 AD is not the world we remember. The Visigoths still hold Aquitaine, but they hold it as foederati, as allies, and their king Alaric too sends his sons to Ravenna to learn Latin grammar. The Burgundians still dwell in the Rhone valley, but their laws are written in a code that borrows equally from Roman jurisprudence and their own traditions. The Franks, Clovis is a name that still means something, but not what it meant in our history. He converted to Catholicism in 496 AD, yes, that much is the same. But he converted in a world where the Roman bishop in Gaul still had the authority to excommunicate him, where the imperial tax collectors still arrived each spring, where the roads still connected Lyon to Arles to Rome with something like reliability. The road. That is the true marker of this divergence. In our history, the Roman road network decayed over the 5th and 6th centuries, its stones pried up for churches, its milestones toppled and forgotten. Here they are maintained, not perfectly. Nothing is perfect, but maintained. A traveler in 510 AD can walk from Londinium to Constantinople on paved stone, and at each manzio they will find a roof and a meal and a stable. The horses are not as good as they were under Augustus. The innkeepers are surly, but the road endures, and the road is the skeleton of civilization. The implications ripple outward like rings in a pond. Without the total collapse of imperial authority in the West, there is no vacuum for the church to fill as a temporal power. The Pope in 500 AD is a bishop among bishops, not a king in white robes, he advises. He does not crown emperors, because there is no interregnum, no desperate need for legitimacy that only a holy hand can bestow. The great monasteries of our Middle Ages, Bobbio, Monte Cassino, Saint-Jean, Gallon, they are built here too, but they are built as schools and libraries, not as fortresses of feudal power. The monks copy Virgil as well as Scripture, and the poems of Ovid survive not in fragments but in full because no one burned them for pagan corruption. The empire has no interest in orthodoxy. The empire is interested in taxes, and so the year 600 AD arrives, and with it something unprecedented. In our history, this is the dark before the dawn. Plague, war, the Lombards tearing at Italy, the Slavs drifting into the Balkans, every institution crumbling into local warlordism. Here, the plague still comes. Disease is indifferent to politics, but the institutions do not crumble. The imperial postal service pauses for 3 years, then resumes. The grain dole in Rome contracts, but does not end. The Senate, that ancient body which in our history last met in the early 7th century, continues to meet. It debates, it writes letters. It funds an expedition to map the coast of Africa. This is the world that sends ships to Britannia in 610 AD, not to conquer. The island has been abandoned for a century, left to the Angles and Saxons and Britons who have made their own kingdoms in the ruins of Roman towns. But the ships carry envoys, and they carry engineers, and they carry a letter from the emperor in Constantinople. No, wait, we must correct that. The emperor no longer rules from Constantinople alone. In 587 AD, after a century of slow reconsolidation, the capital was formally returned to Rome. The Senate voted, the army approved, the logistics were brutal, but the emperor now sits in the Palatine, and the empire is once again a thing of the West. The envoys to Britannia find in the lowlands a patchwork of petty kings who speak a language half Germanic, half Latin. They find Roman roads still in use, though the paving stones are worn thin. They find a bishop in Londinium who claims authority from Gregory the Great. Gregory, who in this timeline never fled to Constantinople, never became pope in a collapsing city, but instead became a diplomat who negotiated peace between the empire and the Lombards. The bishop reads the letter from Rome, and he weeps. No one in Britannia has seen an imperial official in 4 generations. But that is the beginning of this story, not its end. What matters is what comes after. The year 750 AD, the year 900, the year 1100. In our timeline, these are the centuries of feudalism, of knights and castles and serfs and a church that held the keys to heaven and earth. Here they are different. Here there is no Charlemagne, because there is no need for a new emperor in the West. Here there is no Holy Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is already holy enough by virtue of still existing. Here, the universities of Paris and Oxford and Bologna are founded not in the 12th century but in the 8th, because the texts survive, the teachers survive. The infrastructure of learning never collapsed.